Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TMRP, the MetrObelisk radio podcast. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the idea that Star Wars seems to be going down the same route as Marvel went with their movies. You know, barring the Sony Spider-Man movies like Venom or Into the Spider-Verse, those are not connected to Homecoming or Far From Home. And ever since The Mandalorian Season 2 came to an end, I've been sitting around pondering what the future of Star Wars is. And if you notice, The Mandalorian Season 3 isn't coming out first. It's that new Book of Boba Fett series. And I went over the Disney Investor Day announcements and realized that Disney wants Star Wars to be the next MCU. The only difference is instead of being a big screen shared universe, it's going to happen on the smaller screen. And here's the real question, the real meat and potatoes of this. Is this the right step forward, or is this just yet another step backwards? And guys, before we get started, in case if you haven't already done this, subscribe to the channel, and all of the links to the social media pages and other video hosting services that I'm on are all down below in the description. So with that out of the way, let's get right into this week's episode of TMRP. Alright guys, this whole pondering really started for me after they announced that they had secured a writer for Kevin Feige's Star Wars movie. And you would think at the Disney Investor Day that they would be hyping this movie to the fucking moon, given the state of the Star Wars brand nowadays. Well, I just came across a comic book article. I think this was formerly CBR Comic Book Resources. I could be wrong. That basically reads, Star Wars. Kevin Feige claims his movie isn't worth talking about yet. Well, just from the headline alone, we'll get into the article. I'm not going to just take the headline out of context. But like I said, the Star Wars brand at this point is in such a state of decay that you would think that they would be hyping this movie. They would be hyping this movie up to the high heavens just because, hey, Kevin Feige's now going to jump over and do this. It's very similar to what Star Trek did just before Star Trek Beyond. They had already been hyping Star Trek 4 as being the return of Chris Pine, Zachary Quino, and Chris Hemsworth from the very first movie. And also, if you remember, they were hyping the fact that Quentin Tarantino was going to come over and direct a Star Trek movie. So far, neither one of those movies has come out of pre-production, and I think Star Trek 4 is pretty much all but dead because if you guys remember, Chris Pine basically walked away from the negotiating table altogether. But anyway, getting back to this article before I tangent on for far too long, is Kevin Feige claims his movie isn't worth talking about yet. Star Wars fans have been wondering since 2019 when Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige had planned for his announced film for the galaxy far, far away, with the filmmaker recently implying that we shouldn't expect substantial updates on the project for the foreseeable future, and that the current status isn't really worth talking about. Fans will surely be disappointed about how early in the process the film is, but with Feige still working on crafting the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it would seem as though he hasn't been able to commit much time to his Star Wars film at this point. He did, however, clarify how much he loves thinking about the franchises, even just as a fan. Big whoop-de-fucking-do. It's all stuff I love, and everything regarding Star Wars is not anywhere near talking about, Feige confirmed to Screen Rant. So, it is Marvel, but if I wasn't being paid to do it, I would be thinking about Star Wars here in my basement just with my toys and no one would ever see it. It's what I think about all the time. Despite the project only being in the early stages, reports emerging that Loki writer Michael Waldron would be scripting the endeavor, yet neither the filmmakers nor Lucasfilm has given even a hint at what we could expect the project to move forward. Feige isn't the only Marvel transplant who's diving into the Star Wars franchise, as Thor Ragnarok director Taika Waititi, I did forget about him, is also confirmed to be co-writing and directing a film. I did forget about the Taika Waititi Star Wars movie. Quote, we're thinking everything you've heard about that has been leaked, the filmmaker recently admitted to Variety. Now, I don't know if this is Taika Waititi or Kevin Feige. I'm pretty sure that this is Taika Waititi at this point. It's not stuff that, hold on, there's a hyperlink here. I'm gonna make sure. No, it is Feige. It is Feige. Sorry guys, the article did not make it very clear, because all they say is the filmmaker just before. They talked about Taika Waititi before and then said the filmmaker. My thought automatically went to writer-director Taika Waititi. But anyway, getting back to it. Quote, "It's not stuff that we've officially announced or gotten into, so suffice to say, the focus is on all the number of Marvel things that we're working on. The what, where, when, and how of that Star Wars movie, I don't know. I'm excited for the Book of Boba Fett and the Rogue One show and the Obi-Wan show and Patty's movie and Taika's movie after Thor Love and Thunder, of course. The next film in the Star Wars franchise is confirmed to be Patty Jenkins' Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which is set to hit theaters on December 22nd, 2023. Disney has secured release dates in December of 2025 and December of 2027, though it's unknown which projects will take those release dates. I guarantee you, one's going to be the Taika Waititi movie, the other one is going to be the Kevin Feige led. Blah, 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 stay tuned for details, blah, 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 blah. And really what got me going with Kevin Feige and the whole, why Marvel should not be the MCU is because under Kevin Feige, now, if we're going beyond phase 1 of the MCU beyond that has basically been a mile wide, and it has been, described as the franchise is as wide as an ocean, but has the depth of a puddle. It's that all of these storylines over the MCU, they've been built, they were building up to Thanos as being the main bad guy. Guess how many scenes Thanos was in post phase 1 of the MCU? 3. Only 3 scenes. You had the post-credit scene for the Avengers, that was the first one. You had 1 scene in Guardians of the Galaxy. And then you had a post-credit scene in Avengers Age of Ultron that basically where he basically said, well, you know what? Where he says something to the effect of, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And that was it. This is supposed to be your main bad guy going into an Infinity War and Endgame, yet you gave him almost no buildup. No one was even talking about him. Nobody ever saw him. So what's going to happen with these Star Wars shows? Are they going to be stretched? Are all these stories going to be stretched intentionally over all of these shows? And really for what? What are they really planning to at this point? And this brings us to the Variety article. Now, this article is over a month old, I'm not going to lie, where it basically, the headline reads, how Disney and Lucasfilm are remaking Star Wars in the image of Marvel Studios. And as soon as I read that headline, that's when red flags were going off. Now, I did not cover this when the article initially came out. This came out on December 19th, 2020. I think this was a day after Mando Season 2 ended on Disney+. The reason I didn't talk about this at the time is because some things are much more clear in hindsight than they are in the moment. And I feel like this is one of those things that's more clear in hindsight. But anyway, this is going to be a long article, so strap yourselves in. So starting with this article, how Disney and Lucasfilm are remaking Star Wars in the image of Marvel Studios. By the way, guys, if you want to read these articles for yourself, I will link them in the description on down below on the BitChute channel and Odyssey channel. I'm not going to run the risk on YouTube, even though one of them I am linking to the trades. It doesn't matter, since they basically change the rules every 5 fucking seconds. So, whatever, I'm not going to give them a leg to stand on. So, going on to the article. The day Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, the company wasted no time making clear what it was buying for $4.05 billion, announcing 3 new Star Wars movies were already in the works, and a shareholder called the day the deal was announced. Then CEO Bob Iger laid out the company's ambitions. Quote, "Our long-term plan is to release a new Star Wars feature film every 2 to 3 years." End quote. That's a pretty realistic goal. That's what Lucas was doing. He was releasing movies every 3 years, but once the trilogy was done, it was done. Now if he was going, we're going to release a Star Wars movie every 2-3 years no matter what, well, now it's going to start to get a little hairy. Anyway, back to this. 8 years later, it's fair to say that Disney's ambitions for the Star Wars franchise are a fair shade greater, with at least 10 different series in the works for Disney+. And believe me, guys, I will tie this all together by the end. Most were announced last week during the company's Epic Investors Day presentation, which I actually covered already on TMRP. I will also link to that in the description on BitChute and Odyssey. And if I remember on YouTube, I will put a card that should appear right about here. It might appear just prior because I'm a lazy motherfucker. Anyway, the latest about fan favorite character Boba Fett was announced at the end of the post-credits teaser for the season 2 finale of the first live-action Star Wars TV series, The Mandalorian. Yes, and like I said, the book of Boba Fett is actually coming before season 3 of The Mandalorian. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's a franchise-building tactic that's been used for over a decade to astronomically lucrative effect by Lucasfilm's corporate sibling, Marvel Studios. Yes, and other studios have attempted this. Warner Brothers has attempted this with their DC movies. Sony attempted it with, I think, Ghostbusters 2016 was going to be the cinematic universe starter. Universal attempted this with their Dark Universe with The Mummy, and what's the one thing in common between all three of them? All three of those plans failed fucking drastically. And they even say here, it's also Lucasfilm's second attempt to copy it. Yes, they attempted to do it with the sequel trilogy. They wanted to have a multimedia shared universe, and I'm sorry, but it fell apart. At the time Disney bought Lucasfilm, the company was feeling flusher than it had in years thanks to Marvel Studios, the iconic pop culture brand Disney acquired in 2009. In May 2012, the Avengers debuted to record-shattering success. I actually went to see Avengers opening day, and yeah, the first movie was pretty good, but that's kind of when I fell out of the MCU. And in doing so, redefined the franchise filmmaking into a series of creatively interwoven movies, unspooled at what became an unprecedented pace, with 2 or 3 Marvel Studios projects opening each year. By comparison, Iger's initial forecast of a new Star Wars feature every 2 or 3 years was as slow as a dewback lumbering across the sands of Tatooine. Oh, see, guys, we're nerds just like you. Does Star Wars need to be a cinematic universe? No, it really doesn't. So the company quickly pivoted, pushing Lucasfilm to release a new Star Wars movie every year with a series of one-off features set in the larger Star Wars world in between the ongoing Skywalker saga films, which that was a good idea. Was to, not only do the sequel trilogy, but do a bunch of one-offs, and I think they actually get into this here real quick. Let me make sure. Once that final trilogy had concluded, these annual one-offs could spawn their own sequels, propagating Star Wars far beyond anything attempted before with the franchise. Yes, so hopefully you have at least one of the spin-offs that really takes off and becomes successful, and now you can expand off of that. The only problem is that you had Rogue One, which had pretty much a definitive ending, so the only way to expand on that is to go backwards, is to go back before Rogue One, and Solo bombed so fucking hard that I don't think you're ever going to see a Solo 2. Getting back to the article, George Lucas made 3 Star Wars films from 77 to 83, then 3 prequel films 16 years later, blah, blah, blah. We all know this. Suddenly, Disney was going to double the number of live-action Star Wars movies in just 6 years, with an ancillary universe developed over decades in books, anime TV shows, and comics. Just as vast as Marvel Entertainment's core canon, the company was banking that the Star Wars franchise was capable of sustaining such a rapid expansion of its cinematic footprint. And it probably could have, had they not thrown the baby out with the bathwater back in 2014 when they go, oh, hey guys, all the original expanded universe stuff, yeah, that's not canon anymore. Hindsight being 2020, that probably was not the best idea to do, because now all Lucasfilm and Bob Iger did was add more pressure on the sequel trilogy to deliver, and I think we all know that it pretty much didn't. At first, the plan seemed to work. Yes, it did. 2016's Rogue One: A Star Wars Story about the doomed effort to secure the plans for the Death Star was an unqualified blockbuster, earning $1.06 billion worldwide, which for a non-episodic Star Wars movie, I was actually expecting it to make a lot less. So that was actually, that wasn't terrible. But the next one-off film, 2018 Solo, the origin story of young Han Solo, as played by relative unknown Alden Ehrenreich, opened just 5 months after Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and bombed with $393 million globally. Now they do provide an excuse. So let's read it. Let's read it all the way through before I jump in. Granted, Solo was bedeviled by bad press after Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy fired directors Phil Lord and Christopher Miller during production. Notice they don't specify when in production. Reshoots by their replacement, Ron Howard, ballooned the budget to $250 million. Solo became the first ever Star Wars movie to lose money. Okay, one thing that they are not specifying, when Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were fired. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were fired with only 2 weeks left in principal photography. Now, for those that don't know, principal photography is when you initially shoot the movie. So, the vast majority of Phil Lord and Chris Miller's movie was already done. Then Kathy Kennedy fired him and replaced him with Ron Howard, and Ron Howard reportedly reshot like 80 to 90% of the movie, all himself. So let's be fair to this, that that the bad press of Phil Lord and Chris Miller being fired. Personally, I was out on Solo at the time. And then a little movie called The Last Jedi hit and pissed so many people off that they decided to voice their displeasure by just saying, you know what, I'm not going to go see Solo in theaters, fuck you. And what do you know, it actually worked. And basically all Disney did was basically get one movie for the price of two, and this was one of those movies that had to make $1 billion just to break even. And there was, even if Solo had this, like, even if Solo turned out to be an amazing movie and The Last Jedi didn't piss off nearly as many people, how many people were completely turned off by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller by the firing of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller? And if you're one of those people, please do let me know, because I'll tell you straight up, and I've already said this, I was one of those people. So back to the article. But even if Solo had enjoyed a smooth shot with more reasonable budget, the underlying problems were, in hindsight, manifest from the start. Unlike the Marvel Studios movies, Solo didn't really add to an ongoing larger story or illuminate to a heretofore unknown quadrant of the Star Wars creative galaxy. It kind of did, though. It really kind of did. They introduced Kira. They were going to introduce the Crimson Dawn. That's why Darth Maul was in the end. So really, they could have set up the Crimson Dawn in the Han Solo trilogy and then done other things with them. But like I said, Solo bombed so hard that they're probably not going to at this point. But getting back to the article, it answered questions from how Han Solo met Chewbacca to how he got his last name. I would argue that the former was actually interesting. It was always, how did Han Solo meet Chewbacca? But how he got his last name, who fucking cares? And they even go on to say that audiences weren't exactly clamoring to know in the first place. Now what I can see is, okay, we need to get Han Solo and Chewbacca to meet. Okay, because that could be rather interesting. You could have that be an entire movie. Basically be an odd couple between Han Solo and Chewbacca. But then by the end coming together saying that we're stronger as a unit than if we're, fighting each other. But they didn't do that. They immediately relegated Chewbacca to being, Han Solo's co-pilot immediately after they met. And let's get back into this. And most critically, it was banking on nostalgia for a character synonymous with the actor who played him. As charming as Aaron Wright could be in the role, without Harrison Ford, Solo was missing its core appeal. Yes and no. I personally didn't care that they were gonna recast Han Solo because Harrison Ford at that point was in his early 70s. So hey guys, we're gonna set this back before A New Hope with a 70-year-old Harrison Ford. Yeah, right. All they needed to do was I'm gonna go as far as to say this. There is nothing that Solo could have done that would have won people to go see it just because of how much The Last Jedi pissed people off. And then those people who were voicing their criticisms being called man babies and talked down to for months and months and months on end. Solo could have been the best Star Wars movie ever made, even better than anything that George Lucas ever produced. It would not have mattered. Nobody would have given a shit. Because this is what happens when you piss off your core fan base. So let's get back into this. Rather than treat Solo as an object lesson for future movies, however, Disney fully retrenched, canceling the entire Star Wars story endeavor. That was not a good idea. Because I was really looking forward to the one-offs, you know? Like, you could have had, like, a Star Wars horror movie if you really wanted to, and you could just say, hey, this was a one-off, it was experimental, it didn't work. Oh, darn, at least it only cost us, like, $20-30 million to do. Including movies about Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi before it had really even taken off. Yeah, it wasn't a good idea to basically just shit can the entire banner. Honestly, what they needed to do with the Star Wars story banner, and I think I brought this up in my Rogue One and Solo video a few months back. What they needed to do is they needed to focus on the smaller movies, right? The movies that would maybe cost you $20-30 million. Right, make them smaller in scope, and then if one really, really takes off, don't worry about making these canon. Because if, like I jokingly said, yeah, you could have done a Star Wars horror movie. If it doesn't take off, if it doesn't resonate well, you know, Bob Iger, Kathy Kennedy, whoever could come out and say, hey, you know what, the Star Wars Stories banner, that is our experimental branch. So if a movie doesn't take off, it's okay. This is designed to be a one-off and it's not going to have any real impact. But then if you have something where you have like one or two characters like really explode in popularity after it, then you graduate them to a Disney Plus series or a summer blockbuster feature film. You know, have the Star Wars story banner be your proving ground. Don't add all of this pressure onto your Disney Plus shows to perform, especially with the sheer amount of money that they're having to put behind those shows just to get them made. Back to the article. The studio placed a 3-year moratorium on Star Wars movies following 2019 Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. In an April 2019 interview with Bloomberg TV, Iger, with characteristic discretion, called it a pause and a bit of hiatus. A rare, I'm having a brain fart. You know, a rare glimpse inside Disney's strategic thinking outside of the company's quarterly investor reports. The underlying message, however, felt clear. Disney and Lucasfilm had gone too far too fast. Not entirely too. Not being intellectually honest here. The effort to Marvelize Star Wars was frozen in carbonite, its future uncertain. Their problem was not that they had gone too far too fast. Now, I will agree that one movie a year was going to get excessive. But also, when you call the vast majority of your fan base, you know, alt-right trolls and man babies for not liking one fucking movie, that probably did far more damage than releasing one Star Wars movie every year. Let's be intellectually honest here, but I know they're gonna make excuses till Kingdom fucking come that The Last Jedi was fucking amazing, and you're just an alt-right Nazi if you don't like it, blah 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 blah, whatever. Back to the article. It turns out Disney just needed a tact-to-turn warrior and his inexpressibly cute baby companion. Oh my god, Baby Yoda! Though impossible to quantify, given Disney Plus's refusal to make audience numbers public, the wild success of The Mandalorian proved that the Star Wars franchise could thrive outside the confines of the Skywalker saga. No fucking shit! George Lucas proved that back in the 90s and 2000s with the introduction of the Expanded Universe books. Now, granted, some of them did have sequel trilogy characters, and hell, even the video games didn't really focus on the main characters. One of my all-time favorite Star Wars games, Star Wars Republic Commando, follows a group of 4 elite clone troopers during the Clone Wars, and that's it. And if you ask a lot of fans of Star Wars what their favorite Star Wars games are, I guarantee you, the Republic Commando is in their top 10, if not their top 5. So, yeah, no shit. But yeah, George Lucas, you know, proved that Star Wars could thrive outside of the confines of the Skywalker saga. Yeah, no goddamn shit. It was the spark Lucasfilm needed to launch the Star Wars franchise into hyperdrive. You mean hyperspace, right? And if we're going one even further, what they really should have done to really makes people's head spin, and they missed a perfect opportunity for this, is to basically end the sentence with, "It was the spark Lucasfilm needed to launch the Star Wars franchise into ludicrous speed." And if you know what that's from, please let me know down in the comments if you actually know what that's a reference to. Many of the new Star Wars series for Disney Plus announced over the past week. Again, guys, this article's over a month old. Center around familiar characters. The Boba Fett and Obi-Wan spin-off movies have been reborn as streaming series. Diego Luna is headlining a Rogue One prequel series called Andor, which that's been talked about for the last 2 or 3 years. That was nothing new. Justin Simeon, Dear White People, is developing. I think he was the writer-director behind that Netflix series. Is developing a Lando Calrissian series, and Lucasfilm Animation and ILM, that's Industrial Light and Magic, but they're commonly referred to as just ILM, are making an animated series about R2-D2 and C-3PO. Oh, they're rebooting Droids. They're rebooting the Droids animated series from that was from the late 80s, and I don't think it lasted longer than a couple seasons. Crucially, Lucasfilm is also adopting the full Marvel format by interlocking the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and Rangers of the New Republic within the timeline established by The Mandalorian. I'm going to finish this paragraph before I get into it. All these series will be executive produced by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, the two figures at Lucasfilm who, even more than Kennedy, now come closest to holding the kind of overarching vision so famously employed by Marvel Studios chief Kevin Feige. Okay, I'm actually going to stop right here. I lied. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's success comes down to 3 people. It comes down to Jon Favreau, Joss Whedon, and James Gunn. Kevin Feige was just basically just sat back and hired the guys. Whereas Jon Favreau developed the MCU formula going back to the first Iron Man movie. Then you had Joss Whedon, who basically developed the formula for the team-up movies. And then you had James Gunn, who basically came in and kind of, revitalized the Marvel formula when it was getting stale by 2013, 2014. So giving all the credit to Kevin Feige is intellectually dishonest here. Continue with this. And they all will, in stodgy language of Disney's Investor Days announcement, culminate in a climactic story event. But notice they're not saying what they're building to. Because at least with phase 1 of the MCU, okay, now the first Iron Man movie, we had no idea what they were building to. But the post-credit scene in The Incredible Hulk, it was shown very clearly Tony Stark walking into the bar with Nick Fury saying, "I want to build a team." And you see the Avengers logo. So, okay, they are clearly building to the Avengers. But what are they building to with The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and Rangers of the New Republic? They're remaining relatively quiet on what they're building up to because I don't think they even know what the hell they're building up to. In other words, Lucasfilm is aiming for its own Avengers, as I stated. But okay, the part I want to focus on right here. So these 4 shows, you have The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and Rangers of the New Republic are all going to be interlocking. Here's the problem, though. Those were not the only shows that were announced at the Disney Investor Day. The one I'm thinking of is the one that pops in my mind is The Acolyte. That is being set during Lucasfilm's High Republic initiative. You have the Obi-Wan series that got announced. I think you have Star Wars Visions, but if I remember correctly, I think Visions was meant to be an anthology series, so I'm not going to count that. The one I'm trying to think of, The Bad Batch, which is going to be a spinoff to Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So now you're going to have all these shows, all these Star Wars shows on Disney Plus for the foreseeable future, and not all of them are interconnecting. So The Acolyte is not going to be interconnected, yet it's still going to be a show. The Bad Batch is not going to interconnect with The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and Rangers of the New Republic. And what was the other? They haven't even confirmed if the Obi-Wan series is going to do that. So all you're really going to do at this point with having so many shows and all of them not interconnecting, now you're going to create way too much brand confusion at this point. And one thing that I will give Marvel Studios credit for is that all of their movies have interconnected. So, and like I said, barring the Sony Spider-Man movies like Venom, Into the Spider-Verse, I think Maximum Carnage coming out, Sony is doing their own thing with it. But the mainline Spider-Man movies are connecting with the MCU. And like I said, I give Marvel Studios all the credit in the world for doing that. It did not create brand confusion. If you're watching an official Marvel Studios movie, it is a part of this MCU. There is no there's no one-off. There are no one-offs. It all matters. But with here, I think the problem is all of this brand confusion is gonna lead to this whole initiative falling apart. And let's go ahead and continue on with the article, and I'll wrap it up here. The big question now is whether this will all work, as I just brought up. In the wake of Solo's box office belly flop, many observers wonder if Star Wars just wasn't as creatively elastic as the Marvel Studios films. Big problem with that, they are, but you need to take the right approach with it. Which vary widely in tone and approach, from Captain America Winter Soldier to Guardians of the Galaxy, or Thor to Thor Ragnarok, yet somehow share the same core sensibility. To date, every Star Wars project, whether for film or TV, has felt more or less like Star Wars, which they should. It needs to feel like a Star Wars movie first, and if you want to be experimental, that's fine, but you still need to make it feel like Star Wars. I'm not watching Star Wars to watch Star Trek or Babylon 5 or Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 series. I'm watching Star Wars to watch Star Wars. And there's not much so far that suggests the new shows will stray any further, which they shouldn't. It's hard to imagine Lucasfilm making a Star Wars show anywhere near as formally inventive as Marvel's first Disney Plus show, WandaVision. Meanwhile, Feige is currently developing his own Star Wars movie. We just went over this in the very beginning. There's only 3 more paragraphs, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. In an interview with Variety in October about The Mandalorian star Pedro Pascal, Favreau, who directed the first 2 Iron Man movies, made clear he understands the challenges innate in trying to broaden the scope of Star Wars. Quote, I learned a lot from my experience over at Marvel, where it was very organic how it would evolve, Favreau said. Quote, you're paying attention to a larger story arcs and characters that could come together, but also smaller stories of individual characters that could go off on their own thing. The key here is keep maintaining the quality and never scaling to the point that we're losing sight of what's important to us and what people like about the show, end quote. Lucas has made no secret of his deeply ambivalent feelings about what has become of his brainchild, but if Disney can make its expansion of Star Wars work, and if Marvel Studios has proven anything, it's that it is possible to do. The studio would not only put Star Wars on equal financial footing with its Marvel counterparts, it would also live up to the prophecy offered by Lucas on the day Disney bought his company, quote, we could go on making Star Wars for the next 100 years, end quote. And that's going to do it for this Variety article. Basically, what this is amounting to for me is that it's very clear that Lucasfilm had no goddamn plan from the beginning. They tried with the sequel trilogy, and they bumblefucked that all to hell. And then they tried with their Star Wars story initiative, which, again, was a great idea to have that be your experimental division. All you needed to do was constrain the budget, and they threw the baby out with the bathwater the second that Solo failed. And now, because you have one success in The Mandalorian, now you're going to throw all your eggs into the Disney Plus basket, or into the television show basket, and remember, not all of the Disney Plus shows are going to interconnect. Meaning, now you're going to create even further, not just create even further brand confusion, let me expand on that. You're also going to create a system where it's going to be harder and harder for the casual audience to maintain, wait a minute, what shows are connected in this Mandalorian verse and what shows aren't. Oh, fuck this. I'm gonna go watch something else. And honestly, what Star Wars needed to do, and I swear, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up here. What they needed to do with The Mandalorian, they needed to take the Star Trek approach. Now let me explain. Have The Mandalorian be its own show from start to finish. Let's say it goes on for 5 seasons. And then you can still have your spin-offs to The Mandalorian, but make the spin-off in a way that you don't have to watch The Mandalorian to understand the show. Like, I don't need to watch the original Star Trek series to watch The Next Generation. Bad example, so I'll give you an even better one. Star Trek Deep Space Nine was a spin-off of The Next Generation. Do you need to watch Star Trek The Next Generation to understand Deep Space Nine? No, you really don't. Outside of maybe a couple of small nods to people that watch The Next Generation, you don't need to watch The Next Generation, watch Deep Space Nine. Voyager was yet another spinoff of Next Generation. You don't need to watch The Next Generation to watch Star Trek Voyager. That's the approach that they should have been taking. They don't need to take the Marvel approach, because like I said, at some point, there's going to be way too many shows, and not every show is going to interconnect, and everybody's just gonna give up on it because now it's like, well, fuck this, it's way too complicated to try to keep up with. And I think I've said all that I needed to say. I'm just gonna check the time, see how long I've been going nonstop. Wow, this is not the longest, but a pretty long time. So I'm gonna go ahead and end it here after about 35 minutes because all is needed to be said. This is gonna do it this week, guys, for TMRP, the MetrObelisk Radio Podcast. And I don't know when I'm going to bring a TMRP episode back. As I said, this is not going to be a weekly series anymore. So another TMRP may come next week. It might be a review. And as I'm recording this, guys, I am actually getting ready for a Hitman 2016 stream, if you've been keeping up with those. So that's going to do it for this week, guys. And I will see you next time.